It's November 18th, and there is a active volcanic situation developing in southern Iceland. So just near the town of Grindavik, which is not far from the capital of Reykjavik, is a active seismic zone that geologists think is related to magma pushing its way up underneath the island of Iceland. So all of Iceland is volcanic, and different parts are volcanic in different ways. The part of Iceland that's seismically active right now that we're worried about is in the southwest corner near the town of Reykjavik. It's actually not very far from the Keflavik International Airport, which is the airport that you would fly into if you were going to Reykjavik. It's also very close to the Blue Lagoon thermal hot springs that you've probably seen pictures of. And so near this town of Grindavik is this developing situation where there's this very large swarm of earthquakes. So beneath the town of Grindavik and just to the north, geologists have been looking and watching these earthquakes developing. And over the last couple days, say Monday through Wednesday, it was a very diverse swarm of earthquakes. And then later in the week, say Wednesday through Friday, the seismic activity remained mainly the same, except for that trend seemed to shift a little bit to the north, and those earthquakes seem to get a little bit shallower. And what we think that means is that the magma system beneath that portion of Iceland is moving up and starting to propagate towards the northeast. And so this whole area is a normal fault system. And what that means is the town of Grindavik is more or less sitting between two faults. And those faults run underneath the town. Those are called normal faults. And normal faults mean that this single block in the middle is going to drop down. We call that a graben, which is the German word for ditch. And so the areas around the town of Grindavik are relatively going up. The town of Grindavik and the valley nearby is relatively moving down. And that's happening because the North American and the Eurasian plate are moving apart from each other. And as that happens, the crust thins. And so as it thins from the top, that fault block will drop down. That big chunk of rocks that the town of Grindavik's mostly sitting on, it's dropping down. Underneath, portions of the mantle are pushing up and getting closer to the surface. And when that happens, it can melt. It has less pressure on these really hot, plasticky rocks. And as they move up, they experience less pressure and start to melt. And that melt can rise up much like a lava lamp up through and burn through the stuff above it. And that's what's happening is that magma system is moving up. We're seeing the earthquakes as it kind of moves along underneath, probably exploiting fractures and small faults that we can't necessarily see from the surface, and we can't really resolve them using a lot of our specialized techniques, but we know they're there. And as that magma is moving up, it's getting closer, it's inching closer, it's trying to find the easiest way it can get to the surface. And that's why we're seeing these earthquakes. Some of the earthquakes are the magma moving around. Some of the earthquakes are the faults moving. Other earthquakes are the magma affecting the rocks above and around it by not only heating them, but pushing up and causing deformation around the magma, what we would call a dike, an intrusive dike, because it's a vertical body of molten rock. Eventually, that is going to move along that fault zone in a northeast-southwest kind of orientation and find a way to pierce through to the surface. When that happens, that's where the volcano will become active. So where is this likely to happen? Well, we follow the earthquakes. So earlier in the week, the volcanic system was mostly active right underneath the town of Grindavik. And that's what spurred a lot of evacuation of the town to Grindavik. As the week's gone on, the earthquakes have slowly started shifting towards the northeast. And overnight, they experienced a new swarm of earthquakes that are even further towards the northeast. So the best case scenario was for the magma to pierce through to the surface somewhere northeast of Grindavik, far enough away where the Icelanders can block the lava flows from entering and destroying the town of Grindavik. That seems to be happening based on the earthquakes. Now, it could pop up anywhere. We don't understand the heterogeneity or the differences in the ground, the fractures, the faults, the weak zones. We can't see them, and it's so hard to figure out where those exist right at the surface. And so that magma could really come up anywhere. And start the new eruptive period. And it could pop up under the town of Grindavik. It could pop up off in the ocean, and it could emerge even further northeast than we're expecting. But so it seems that magma is exploiting some sort of fracture and working its way towards the north. It's possible as it was moving up under the town, it kind of stagnated and crystallized, and whatever weakness was there, it filled it more or less. It shut itself off from getting to the surface, and now it's exploiting along the direction of the fault, which we would call a long strike. It's migrating along the fault fracture system, trying to find somewhere to pierce through. And so that's why a lot of geologists are starting to speculate now that the eruption is going to occur much further to the northeast of town, which is good for the town because a mile, 2 miles, that is a long distance for lava to flow. And that gives those construction crews time to put up earthen barriers or for them to in place water pumps, potentially pumping seawater onto it. They've done that in the past, although that is a long way to pump water. But if they have to, I'm sure they will try. I'm also kind of curious to see if they use any sort of aerial firefighting techniques, which, I mean, think about a lava flow. It's a thick, molten mass of rocks. And as it's rolling along, it doesn't take much cooling to get it to transition from that really flowy, liquidy lava, which we call pahoehoe. If it cools down or the conditions change just a little bit, you can get it to transition to something called aa, which is blocky lava. And it does not flow as easily, and it will not flow as fast. And so you start thinking about aerial firefighting techniques. What happens if you drop a bunch of water on that lava front? The lava flow front may cool, may slow down, and it may ultimately crystallize in place. And that creates a barrier for the lava behind it to get it to route to another direction. So I'm kind of curious to see what they'll do. The Icelanders are very resourceful people. They live on an island that has almost no trees, and they have survived and thrived for so long. I think you're going to see the Icelandic spirit step up here and fight this thing. And it's what they've done in the past. The last time a volcano threatened a town, they fought it and they won. And so I think you can almost guarantee that they're going to fight this tooth and nail to try to save that town if they can. So it should be interesting to watch both geologically and then also see the Icelanders battle this volcano when it kicks up. It hasn't started yet. I've seen some stuff on YouTube that seem to make it seem like it had started. Those are archival footage so far. As of 8:19 Central Standard Time on November 18th, the eruption had not started. It could start any minute now, but it had not started. If you go look at the live feed from Iceland, you'll probably be able to see where this thing pops up. In fact, RUV, which is the Icelandic news agency, they've got a really good set of cameras. There's a couple other good live streams that'll show the town of Grindavik, and you'll see a really standalone building that's sometimes very bright. That's a greenhouse that's kind of out by itself. That greenhouse is more or less sitting right in the spot where a lot of those earthquakes have been occurring. So if you watch those live streams and you see that greenhouse, that's right maybe a little between there and off screen to the left. That's really what you're looking for. That's where it's most likely to pop up. Could pop up anywhere along that linear trend, but that's where I'm watching. Look at the lighthouse. Look around the lighthouse. That's probably or the greenhouse. It's a greenhouse. It's not a lighthouse. So let me describe what it's probably going to look like when or I guess if it doesn't have to erupt. That's important to know. It might not erupt. Everything may crystallize. The magma flowing into that dike may slow down, and it may never reach the surface. If it does reach the surface, it's likely to look like eruptions from the same system in past years. It erupted this summer. It erupted in 2022. I think it erupted again in 2021. It's been a moderately regular system every couple months, creating a new magmatic system every couple months, creating a new venting to the surface and creating a string of volcanoes that usually coalesce into one large cinder cone volcano, and then from there emitting lava flows all over the surrounding valleys. That's happened the last couple years. The smart money is that's exactly what's about to happen. And so we have video of the 2023 summer eruption, and what happened in that eruption is you started to see the ground smoke and steam a little bit from where the magma was getting very close to the surface. It was volatilizing any water in the soil, so you're seeing steam, and you're seeing smoke as it started to char and burn any organic material at the surface. Eventually that turned into the moss on the surface right above where the volcano was about to form, eventually just catching on fire. And so you started seeing these small moss fires. That evolution took minutes to hours. So once this started, it was very, very brief. And it occurred during daylight hours, so there were people out videoing this evolution of the process. So Once you started seeing the moss, it was minutes to hours again before you started to see ground bulging and some bubbling. And before long, that bubbling was just lava emerging from the ground. And so, again, within a couple hours there, that had developed from a small little bubble into a large fissure system where you had this linear string of what we call vents, which is where the magma is reaching the surface and becoming lava, and it just spewing lava, what we call a lava fountains, a series of them creating what we call a lava curtain. So just imagine a wall of lava. And pretty soon, that was emitting flows that were radiating in all kind of directions very quickly. Again, within hours, those flows would shift. And then within several days, that had turned into a single cinder cone volcano. More or less, they had merged together. And that's the structure that maintained itself for months and months and months. And we have some footage. This was flown with the Missouri State, one of our Missouri State unmanned aerial vehicles in July of 2023. And you can see each one of those little bubbling spots. That would have represented where those vents were reaching the surface deep down below. And then that system's more or less stayed in the same place. It doesn't have to stay in the same place. It can shift and move. But the last systems have all kind of stayed moderately spatially or geographically centered in one spot. So that's what's likely to happen. It's likely that those vents are going to hit the surface. They're going to start off as small, maybe a couple feet across. You call it a meter across, and then tens of meters long. And then before long, that might develop into a much larger system. But if you were to be standing there and watching all this, it would take minutes to hours for this full system to create a large lava flow